Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album, the collaboration album between LMNO and Mr. Brady, titled 25/8. You know, LMNO, there is such a thing as flooding the market. For those of you who follow this web series, you'll probably be aware that this is the fourth time I've covered LMNO in 2 years. A rough-edged California MC with a reputation for a relentlessly monotone delivery, and yet bars complex and thought-provoking enough to redeem it. What he's also known for is his insane release schedule. In 1 year, he dropped 10 albums worth of material with various producers and collaborators, to the point where it actually just got exhausting to keep up with him. And yet, I still do. Mostly because after his collaboration album with the producer Evidence, titled After the Fact, and that album was excellent, I'm still convinced he can deliver something of that level of quality. Now, one of the better received albums from that crazy year, which is 2010, was called Banger Management, which paired him with Mr. Brady, an MC whose lower tone and softer delivery actually made LMNO's conspiratorial rasp sound energetic and lively. The two have collaborated plenty since then, and this year they sought to put together a new collaborative project, the instrumentation handled by New York producer Aesthetic. For the most part, I was interested in this. Yeah, I know, 4 projects in 2 years on this channel, but LMNO can still bring up interesting material in his bars, and Mr. Brady would offer some good contrast at least. So, how does 25/8 turn out? Well, honestly, I've been struggling with this one. My playlist has covered this a week or so ago, close to when this dropped, but with every single listen through 25/8, I'm left with less to really dissect about it. And sure, part of it is because it is a collaboration album that doesn't exactly have as deep conceptual ambitions as LMNO's previous work, but part of it is I feel that many of the lyrical concepts have been thoroughly explored on previous albums that I'd just be repeating myself if I discussed it, because LMNO is repeating himself. Now, I will say this is probably my least favorite record that I've covered from LMNO to date, and as usual, it's got nothing to do with him. In fact, where I might have come down pretty hard on some disconnected lyricism on Bronze Age, the album that I did with Flavor Caprice, he steps up his technical wordplay and flows to a much tighter level on this album, with bar after bar connecting with multisyllabic rhymes, and he's definitely improved as a more expressive and emotive MC. I definitely like that about him. Now, granted, part of that might be placed in contrast to the lower, rougher tones of Mr. Brady, who might opt for a little bit more personal framing to add some real punch to his work, but isn't as polished as an MC, with a fair few number of flubbed rhymes and not just quite staying in focus of LMNO as well as they could. They don't have the same chemistry. They do have some in trading bars, and they got some good interplay, but it's hard not to get the impression that LMNO, he's on a different level when it comes to stage presence and personality, and that's not even touching the content. Even still, as much as I like both of them, they are above most rappers in the mainstream lyrically. And look, if you listened to an LMNO project before, the actual bars here shouldn't really surprise you in terms of their content. Socially aware material castigating mainstream rap for forsaking any sort of lyrical quality, a mainstream society fragmenting under its own weight and decaying institutions, and hustling on the edge to extract whatever they can to manage to survive on the outskirts. Unsurprisingly, the subject of plenty of songs is systemic police injustice, as you'd expect coming out of 2014 and 2015. And you can tell that LMNO and Mr. Brady are just straining at the leash to fight back harder beyond their words, and they're both quick to call out mainstream rappers who talk a lot about death in their bars and killing people, but have never come close to even addressing political subject matter or actually living that life. They're trying just to wallow in their own debauchery. And at this point, LMNO and Mr. Brady, they're done trying to save these rappers. In their more thrifty, hardworking lane, they can succeed while the rest just topples in upon itself. They'll last while they won't. You get a few more conceptual tracks, the Drug Trips of Loaded that features them defeating inner demons only to be rejected by polite society because they're on drugs, the Night Terror of Hush that shows them tracing the roots of their insecurities that are beyond their own control. But for the most part, the bars loosely sketch out the picture of two MCs very comfortable in their underground lane. But in a sense, that looseness is part of the issue, because it's hard to get a real sense of urgency and real danger from this album. I mean, sure, LMNO's conspiratorial rasp does a lot to help and improve that urgency, as does Mr. Brady's more personal stories told with a little bit of a darker tone, but I find myself looking for more drama in these stories, a little bit more confrontation, and it doesn't really materialize beyond stuff that, you gotta be honest here, I've heard it before. And a major part of this is the production, which might be the most fragmented and ramshackle beats that LMNO has ever picked up, loaded with grimy, rough-edged electric guitars, textured percussion, and burbling, borderline chiptune synthesizers. And while I've warmed a little bit to Aesthetic's production after the many times I've listened to this album, the majority of the synth tones just do not work for me whatsoever, mostly because they slip off rhythm and really don't fit well with the atmosphere of these tracks. Take Rearrange, for instance. Putting aside the fact that the opening synth line sounds like it was composed on a cheap Casio keyboard does not sound very good, we then get this warm scratchiness over the rest of the beat that doesn't match at all with the synth tone. And sure, LMNO sounds fine over it, you can rap over anything with a beat, but when I commented about how these synths could work when I reviewed Bronze Age with the one song that came on there, I meant more that the tone itself could have a little bit more bite and edge, not just being supplied by a filter, which actually does happen later on this album. The song Fragment Street Art with its low fuzzy gurgle, although that song could have been fleshed out a little bit more. And the exasperating thing is that without that bite in the tone itself, the higher fidelity synths don't match all that well with the roughness of the rest of the mix, like in the whirling cascades against the dusty beat and pianos on Tough Gets Going, the oily squealing blare on Louded that sounds like a drug trip in the worst possible way, and then the transition from the piano and mournful strings to this ugly oscillating chiptune on the back half of Hunger Pains. Now, that's not saying that there aren't instrumental moments that do work here. The choice to bring in some rougher guitar tones is a very good one across the board, and pays big dividends on Pavement and the title track. The strings that show up on Hunger Pains and New York Minute, they sound great, and the warped, spacey synth against the very clean jingle, the percussion on Clean, it ended up working surprisingly well for me. One of the few places where that actually synth choice worked for me. And yet, the more I listened through 25/8, it did not grip me as much as I really wanted to. I've seen a couple of reviews suggesting that LMNO is on autopilot these days, and I don't quite buy that, especially as his delivery has noticeably improved. But for a collaboration album like this, looking for a sense of urgency or vitriolic fire, or even its level of deeper insight beyond what LMNO typically delivers, it doesn't come through, and that leaves me feeling a little disappointed. So for me, this album is getting a strong 6 out of 10 and a recommendation, but there are better LMNO projects that dropped in the past 2 years. And if he happens to see this review, dude, as an MC, I'm only enjoying your delivery and lyrical construction more and more, but this album felt very comfortable for you. I think you could stand to push yourself and your collaborating producers even harder outside of that comfort zone. You've got more capacity to deliver here, because if the last 4 releases I've reviewed have proven anything, you can definitely spit. I just want you to focus that and refine it into something that's really special. Just saying. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums that come out that before you want me to cover, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.